What's the wildest thing a "you up" text has led to? At 2 a.m., I got a text from my childhood friend Brett asking if I was awake. I hadn't heard from him in months, not since his dad's funeral. I texted back instantly, worried something was wrong. "Can you come pick me up? I'm at Memorial Hospital." No explanation, just an address. My heart dropped. Memorial was 2 hours away. I threw on sweats and grabbed my keys, not even bothering to change out of my ratty sleep shirt. When I pulled up, Brett was sitting on the curb, head in his hands. His knuckles were bloody, and his expensive suit was torn. He looked like he'd been crying. Without a word, he got in my car. The silence was thick as we drove through the empty streets. Finally, at a red light, he spoke. "Remember my dad's Rolex? The one he was buried with?" His voice cracked. "My stepmom sold it. She waited 3 months, then dug up his grave and took it off his body. I almost swerved off the road." "What? How do you know?" "Found the receipt. She sold it to some collector for $86,000. He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "She didn't even wait half a year before robbing his corpse." Brett's dad had worked 3 jobs to afford that watch. He'd worn it every day for 30 years, even when they could barely afford groceries. It was supposed to be Brett's college fund, but his dad loved it so much that Brett insisted he be buried with it. I confronted her tonight at dinner. She said she needed the money for bills, while wearing new diamond earrings. His hands were shaking. I lost it, started throwing things. She called the cops, but I ran before they came. Been walking for hours until I ended up at the hospital. I pulled into a 24-hour diner. Brett needed food, and I needed time to think. Over lukewarm coffee, he told me his plan. He had proof of the grave tampering, photos his stepmom took to authenticate the watch for the sale. He was going to the police tomorrow. "That's why I called you," he said quietly. "I need somewhere to stay. She's probably changed the locks by now." I had a tiny 1-bedroom apartment and was barely making rent, but I didn't hesitate. "Stay as long as you need." 2 days later, his stepmom was arrested. The story made local news. Wealthy widow arrested for grave robbery. The collector returned the watch after learning where it came from, but when the police recovered it, Brett didn't want it anymore. Said it felt wrong now. Instead, he sold it himself. Used half the money to buy a proper headstone for his dad. The other half? He donated it to the hospital where his dad died, specifically their program helping families afford end-of-life care. Brett stayed with me for 6 months. We never talked about that night again. But every year on his dad's birthday, we go to that same diner at 2 a.m., order the same terrible coffee, and somehow, it tastes a little better each time. The watch ended up funding treatment for 12 families who couldn't afford hospice care. Brett's stepmom served 8 months in jail, but the real punishment was the shame. She moved away after getting out, couldn't handle the whispers and stares at the grocery store. Last week, Brett got a letter from one of the families the watch money helped. The wife wrote that because of the donation, her husband spent his final days at home instead of a sterile hospital room. She enclosed a photo of him smiling in his favorite chair, surrounded by his kids. Brett hung that photo next to his dad's.